name's Jenny Pickerel and I'm a reader in environmental geography at Leicester University. I am academic and I've always been interested in social change and activism, and know the kind of naive slogan that we can all make the world better. That's what's always interested me. And so I've done a lot of different research over the years on activism and different campaign groups that are trying to tackle environmental, anti-capitalist or anti-war issues. And my concern amongst that has been to understand how we can engage more people in doing that, what works about these campaigns, what happens to the activists involved, so how does it affect them personally, how does it affect their everyday lives, and then also what are the alternatives they're suggesting. So I don't think any of the activists I've ever worked with don't have a better alternative that they're proposing. So I've spent a lot of work in recent years looking at what those alternatives mean and whether they would work. And I hope to carry on in the next 10 years or so looking at those solutions and understanding if we could put some of those alternatives really into practice. About 12 years ago I was writing as an academic, but I post-PhD really started to write in book form and really enjoy that kind of the long process of describing my ideas. So it's been an evolving process in the last few years of fine-tuning how to write, basically. Never found it easy, so it's something I'm still learning. It's a fine balance between trying to be constructively critical of the things I'm looking at, so trying to understand them, unpack them, work out what's going on, what's working, what isn't, while also being hopeful all the time, because most of the things I write about I support passionately and I want them to succeed, but I want to always have an academic viewpoint as well, which doesn't mean that I'm impartial. I'm always biased about the things I'm writing about, but I think an academic viewpoint allows you to look critically at things and think quite deeply about the implications of what's going on. But I think I used to write a bit too negatively, and I now try to write a bit more hopefully, so point out what's really good and how we can replicate that and improve that. I give a lot of talks, and I would give talks about, for example, anti-war activism, about where it was succeeding, where it was failing, how it could be improved. But I had got questions from the audience that said, well, I agree with what you say, but now I'm feeling quite low. And I know that you've identified things we could do, but it wasn't very uplifting. And I've realised the power of being hopeful and optimistic and a bit more sort of passionate about the work has a significantly more uplifting impact. So I do that in my writing, and I do that in my teaching as well now, which is always really good things that we can take away from anything that we write about. And I find that that's more helpful, basically, for the people that I want to communicate with. So the target audience is normally academics, but I always want to be writing for the broader public. But by that I mean the politically aware, the progressive people who are interested in new ideas, who want to change things. So the sort of small initial audience is academia, but I think that academic work can always reach more broadly. And it should certainly include those groups with whom I've worked, which is a real tension in terms of language, about writing something that academics think is useful, but also writing something that activists think is useful. I don't always get that right, but that is the aim. I see the value of academia because it's a space where we can have quite radical thoughts and we can teach quite radical thoughts, and we can have quite big blue skies thinking, where we don't have to always deliver a perfect idea or a perfect solution. We can engage with some really different ideas. So I want to be in academia and write in academia because I think it's a really productive space. But academia can't exist on its own. It has to be part of the broader change and broader society that we want. So to me, there's no point just writing in academia. Of course I have academics that I like to read. They're often geographers, but what I really admire in writing are those journalists who can write about really complex ideas in a way that anyone can understand, or consistently write passionately about issues, even when they're well aware that a lot of the time they're not being listened to, like John Pilger. His consistent commitment to those people that he's writing about and those campaigns that he's invested in is something that is really admirable. And so it's those people's ability to communicate that I admire. So, for example, I've written about the emotional elements of activism because I understood that I'd had quite a lot of emotional responses to the activism I'd been part of. So it kind of dictates the topics that I'm writing about. But it's also my personal experience is that writing's quite hard, and so I want it to be worth the effort. I want to be worth the time that I've put into it. And so increasingly I'm thinking quite carefully about what I'm going to bother spending the time writing and where I'm going to publish it, as opposed to just writing as much as I can. Because when I look out into the world, I see so many different things going on. But academia is quite slow. So often the really interesting things that are happening currently will take 2 to 3 to 4 years to study. So by the time you're really writing about it, to other people it's history. So my concern is it relevant anymore? Should I always be writing about what happened yesterday or today or what I want to happen tomorrow? And I have to sometimes remind myself that I'm an academic because I want to have the time to reflect upon and analyse in detail what's happening. That I'm not a journalist and I can't respond immediately to what's going on. But that does make you wonder whether your work's relevant.